And so the grace of gathering and bringing focus to the presence that is, just through the grace of gathering. That when the focus is upon the presence, when the focus is upon the holy yes, then the holy is here, right? When two or more are gathered in my name, then I am here among them, right? So just the focus upon the presence that is brings forward a deeper and finer frequency of recognition that what is focused upon is what is nourished. And so if the longing is for freedom, if the longing is for God, for the glory, to find the oneness with Ma, it is to keep the focus upon what is longed for. Because what is focused upon is what is nourished. And so if the focus is upon the mind and the story and the narrative of limitation, then that is what is being nourished. And that is what will be the lived experience, right? It is to elevate your own knowing. And the elevation of your own knowing is to keep the focus upon that which knows what is true, and to nourish yourself, your true self, so deeply, nourishing yourself, the one self, so deeply is in utter service and support of the whole. It is a natural flow of reverence. It is living life as a living reverence, living life in its natural, perpetual surrender into itself, in utter devotion to its own wholeness. And really, this flow of pure devotion is like a nourishing flow. It is the flow of bliss into itself. And it is this nourishing flow that, let's say, allows wholeness to be ever whole and never, ever be diminished, right? That if at any point wholeness were to not be absolutely 100% in surrendered devotion to itself, it would fracture the integrity of wholeness. But the whole point of this unfolding recognition and remembrance is that wholeness never ever has been anything other than absolutely integral and whole, pure, right? And that remembrance is alive within. And the remembrance requires to jump into the flow of devoted surrender that is the flow of life, flowing in itself, as itself, in utter harmonizing balance always. Because the integral whole is so utterly whole and all-encompassing. It already knows, right? And it is just to illuminate every fiber of that which does not seem to know in order to release it into the remembrance of what is whole. And so what is nourished is what is lived. That we're elevating, amplifying, enlivening, fully nourishing the knowing, and not dwelling in the sense of lack and limitation. That we are illuminating and welcoming any sense of lack and limitation, but we're welcoming it as that which knows it is not the truth. We're not welcoming it from a narrative or story perspective that says, oh, poor you. Oh, how hard. It's a true compassion. And true compassion welcomes openly, but it does not indulge any sense of victimhood or victimization. True compassion does not indulge or even see a sense of separation or victim, right? And so true compassion, true love is the grace that can sometimes be fierce enough to pop the illusion and the delusion of the sense of separation, the sense of victim, the sense of how hard it is, poor me, right? And so too, it is here to never take on board that story of complaining, the one that wants to complain, right? Do not nourish the complainer, but notice how easy it is to sneak into a small talk conversation which plays down the shining radiant truth and somehow feels like, in order to connect, that complaining is a way of creating connection. Let's join in a story of how hard it is, whether it is a complaining about the weather, or whether it's complaining about money. That's a great one, right? How expensive things are, how hard it is, what a great lack there is. Complaining about health, right? Just to notice all of the ways that there can be a collaboration with the mind's narrative and sense of victimhood, and just to catch it as the love and compassion that is true, that sees it, but does not collaborate and create an allegiance with it, welcomes the sensation and the old stress in the nervous system to be released, but does not collaborate. And so it is to notice within your own functioning when you are caught in a way of relating that feels like you have to take the low road, right? You have to take the road of delusion in order to small talk. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Just see it and shine and nourish what is true. Be in such utter devotion to this glory that you bring the presence of God into illumination in any conversation, that you don't lose yourself. You don't give away the glory just to a denser frequency out of some habitual idea that you have to move in conditioned ways. You know, even if you are in the company of a complainer, rather than joining in the complaining and joining in the, oh yeah, it's so hard, poor me, poor you, poor us, right? What a life it is, what a picture, you know, what a situation that the world is in. Instead of that, it is really to go deeper, dive deeper, immediately, jump off and go deeper and find out what is underneath this need to complain, what is being stirred. Come to such a presence with what is really going on and have the courage to meet the messy truth, right? Meet the dirty truth underneath the pleasantries of surface connecting, right? Have this willingness to say, you know, I want to go deeper than this. I don't want to meet you in a story of victimhood and complaining. I don't want to pretend that I'm in accord. What I'd like to know is what's really going on for you, because it sounds like you're having a hard time, right? Invite presence, invite depth, invite the presence of the glory of God and the utter devotion that is alive in you to come forward and be shared. Bring the presence forward. Don't leave the presence in order to nourish smallness. Don't leave the glory to nourish the mundane, the profane, right? It's to rest and to risk knowing yourself more deeply by not being willing to act out a dishonoring of your own knowing of truth, right? Because it's painful. It's painful to move in these ways. And part of living this glory is to just keep nourishing this glory, to be the being, to know the knowing, and to keep illuminating everything that seems to not know this truth, and be the flow of surrender that carries everything into the remembrance, that we bring every fiber that thinks it is separate or is dwelling in belief to the light of presence. And really this is what it is about. It is about such a depth of presence, that this presence holds a kind of autonomy. It holds a true power. It holds the true power of being yourself. It holds the light, the love that is. And it is this light, this love, and the devotion and utter surrender into living this that actually offers the possibility of companions coming to a deeper freedom, rather than feeling that you have to meet in a conditioned dynamic, that you stop and you rest in presence. And in resting in presence, you offer presence, right? You offer a willingness. You offer a willingness to meet in a true depth of presence, that you don't leave yourself because it feels yucky to leave yourself, right? Nourish yourself, be the shining radiant light. That in this knowing we are way showers, and it takes a courage to be a way shower, because it is an invitation to leave conformity, to leave conventionality, because conformity and conventionality is separation. You cannot live this awakeness in true abidance if you are compelled to conform, because being compelled to conform and to try to take this truth that is infinite, unbounded, back to a worldly projection is to absolutely take a U-turn from the awakeness back into separation and an idea that, let's say an idea that embodiment is somehow bringing this truth back to a humanness that is a human condition. We have to have the courage to see deeper, to recognize deeper that true embodiment is not something that somebody does. That true embodiment is the willingness to embody this by not conforming and not playing out conventionality, but being a way shower by living in utter devotion, living in such a depth of presence that you will only meet in presence, right? And that you're really, all that's really happening is that you're meeting yourself more deeply. Because what you seem to be meeting where you're leaving yourself is just yourself. It's just a part of yourself that is wanting to be met in presence. What you can know is that every being met in utter presence and a willingness to be fully present and to bring a depth. Every being, even if it seems like they want to talk about the weather and what they're a victim of at the moment, being met in utter presence, where the invitation is to say, you know, underneath your complaining, it feels like there's something deeper going on. And that probably the feeling that you're noticing has probably been with you your whole life. And what you can guarantee is that most beings will be so willing to spill the beans from a greater depth. But most beings are so conditioned to not move from the greater depth. Most beings are just conditioned to play out surface dynamics because that's all that's ever been offered. And actually the invitation to really reveal the truth of the heart is actually such a precious invitation. Even if you might be listening to a story to start with, it's a bridge, right? The story holds wisdom, and the story can be a bridge as long as you don't collaborate with the story. Oh yes, poor you. No. Right? Keep the reflection of what is being felt alive, because then there's this incredible possibility of hearts cracking open and a depth of connection actually coming to presence, right? Coming through the surface layers, the heart opening and coming to a connection in presence. It's actually meeting yourself more deeply. It's a willingness to meet yourself more deeply and to not feel like you have to move within this surface dynamics of small talk and connection that feels very unnourishing to everyone. But as a way shower that's living this, the devotion, it has to illuminate every area where these kind of constrained conditioned dynamics are playing out. And this courageous devotion to nourish yourself more deeply by shifting dynamics to a greater depth, right? Because it's meeting yourself, it's gathering, it's letting every moment be satsang, right? A gathering in truth, letting every moment be a gathering in the glory of God. So where two are more or more are gathered in the name, then that one is here, the glory is here, the divine is here. And so what an incredible power to be able to invite the presence of the divine into every connection without necessarily being like evangelistic in the expression, but allowing there to be a depth of light and loving presence in your truth and your devotion and nourishment of yourself, that you can shift every connection to a profound, illumined moment of glorious nourishment for all beings, that you can invite the presence of God into every moment. You can be singing thy holy name in every moment. You can be in utter devotion in every moment by just nourishing what is true, by allowing your commitment to be a meeting always in what is true, and not nourishing these habits to meet in surface dynamics that are all about complaining and negative and gossip and finger pointing and just using it as a way to dump your projections, right? A dumping ground. And don't let anyone dump their stuff in your sacred ground, right? Be ready to call it, invite something deeper, right? It's such an incredibly potent, powerful way to know yourself more deeply, is to catch the places where you're small talking, catch the places where you're complaining, catch the places where you're moving from allegiance with separation, where you're moving from a story of scarcity, where you're moving from a story of victimization. It's to catch it and know that if that's what you're nourishing, that is going to be the lived reality, right? Complaining is a sure way to absolutely block the flow of infinite possibility and potentiality and the true being of divine abundance. It's the sure way to block the flow of life, living itself fully at the point of gorgeous surrender that you are. You know, we are life living itself, and life is a perpetual surrender. So what we are is living surrender. We are living surrender. We don't do surrender and arrive somewhere surrendered. We are living as a perpetual surrender, right? The greatest glory that we can come to in this unfolding is to be absolutely responsible for the sincerity of your surrender in every moment, right? You don't ever arrive anywhere, and be very suspicious of anyone that thinks they have. Invite them deeper, right? Through your surrender, right? Be in such a depthful surrender that the recognition is there is never an arriving, but there's being a living surrender. And sometimes we speak of this as always having a willingness to look, because awareness is always looking. Awareness is always aware. And there's never someone that speaks of arriving somewhere. There's never someone that can be speaking of achievement or gain in this unfolding. Because to be yourself, to be the illumined resonance, to be Shiva, to be one with the glory, it is to not be someone. The whole point is that there's no one left, that you are utter humility, that there's no one left, that the heart is not someone's heart. It's not a personal heart. It is the depthful surrender of all sense of personal into being an infinite, unbounded, eternal flow of life surrendering into itself. And that it dances in this incredible way as these unique beings without ever separating or truly diversifying. But the unique flows of intelligence, the unique laws of nature play out, but nothing ever has to be concretized or held as a position. But this true embodiment is to be the embodiment of living surrender, to be a flow of living pure devotion, and to let the life be a living example, not by speaking about it, not by singing the song of accolade to someone, but by offering any subtle thread of that one that might want to own it back to the divine, right? Because those voices will come. And as soon as it's seen, just see it, illuminate, smile, and say, I am not that. I am yours. I am no one. I am nothing. And offer yourself back. Offer all that you could possibly hold a position as back. Just offer every fiber of your humanness back to the divine, so that this condition, specialitis, can be healed. All specialitis can be healed in the light of the holy in every moment, right? That we can offer any fiber of specialitis back to the holy transmutation of divine love, that we can live in and as divine love. But there's never someone that has ever got this, that the someone is the position, and that one is constantly surrendered. And yet we find out what is it to live as a constant flow of life? Well, you find out by being that. You can't find out conceptually what that is. Of course, how would that be? How could that be true? We find out by being the living fire, right? We find out by being the aliveness of life. And the aliveness of life is that which is constantly spontaneous and surprised by itself, and awake and aware to the play of the patterns and discordance and the whole play of that which can get a little messy, a little sticky, a little forgetful, a little stuck in story. It's this openness that includes it all, but never identifies with any of it. Doesn't identify as a me that's achieved anything, doesn't identify as a me that's getting it wrong, doesn't identify as a me that's never going to get it, doesn't identify in any way with anything that's happening, but just living as the what is that is just happening, just flowing. And it looks like life, right? It looks like life living itself, and it lives itself in every flavors. Life goes to the grocery store. Life goes on trips. Life sleeps. Life, eats and has a digestive system that, sometimes gets a little upset. But the more that we are aligned with being life, we live aligned with nature more and more. We live as the simplicity of life. And there's a natural refinement that happens as the being a perpetual surrender, being a perpetual surrender, being constantly in the glorious celebration of being humbled. Alleluia. Another pattern is seen. Alleluia. Another holding place that feels uncomfortable to the me and the mind is being seen through and is in a process of collapse where the character is, feeling intensity and lying on the floor, feeling terrible. And there's something bigger that's able to hold a space of illumined presence and love for the story of me to collapse into, right? This all-encompassing embrace that's holding the truth, the light, the love, for the whole story of me to collapse into, and is most importantly creating the sense of safety for that to happen, right? Because the story of me will not collapse into what doesn't feel safe. It will keep resisting. But this is where the story of what awakening is has got to dive deeper itself, right? It has to go deeper, because even the story of awakening in the collective consciousness is a little bound in ideas, because one little taste can give the sense of wow, but one little taste isn't the whole taste, right? And so we have to keep tasting and tasting and tasting, and we never know what the whole taste is, because in our human life we cannot embody the wholeness. We can be one with the wholeness, but no nervous system is in human embodiment right now that can actually embody the whole, because the nervous system would explode. Right? It can't, no nervous system of an embodied human experience can hold that. But we can let go into that and be one with that and be in the process of being refined to know that. We can let go into that. And that's where we stop even speculating or any kind of any possible fathomable comprehension, because the letting go is into divine cognition, right? In the oneness, we let go of any sense, because we are in oneness with divine surrender. And so we are living divine surrender, and we are perpetually letting go of every fiber into that divine surrender. And we let go of any need to measure or understand. And we definitely never arrive as someone, right? And so this is what starts to shift the collective consciousness and its ideas, is that we're willing to live in an unconventional, non-conforming depth of truth that is before even the most profound worldly teaching about awakening. It's like we have to live before all of these conventional ideas in a complete autonomy of your own direct experience, in your own oneness with the glory, right? That you don't have any intermediary, right? That you have to go through, that your autonomy of your own unfolding is so illumined with your knowing that you're connected with the Sat Guru, you're connected with Ma in your internal functioning, in the finer frequencies, and you're opening to this autonomous remembering. And so what could we say about what this gathering is? So this gathering then is satsang. It's joining in the truth. It's joining in this perpetual surrender, that we're all equally this living surrender, that we're all joining in this living surrender. And this vehicle that's speaking is just expressing its living surrender, right? It's not arrived anywhere. It's just being used in this moment as the expression, right? The expression is the flow of life. The expression is the flow of remembrance. It is the flow of living surrender, right? So the within the autonomy, it is to have a depthfulness of responsibility for your own sincerity, which allows the depth of surrender to be as holy as it can be, as pure in its devotion as it can be. And of course, this depth of surrender is governed, let's say, within the laws of nature by the one-pointedness that we have. The more that one-pointedness is truly one-pointed, then we enter into the finer flows of surrender, the finer flows of the natural, let's call it the flow of attraction, which is the flow of the divine carrying itself into itself. We're in a flow of oneness. We're in a flow of grace. We're in a flow of life living itself, which is absolutely the same as the divine, surrendering into its wholeness to maintain the integrity of its divine wholeness. That the flow of pure devotion and pure surrender, it dances at all the frequencies, right up to the surface of life, human experience. The same flow of devotion and surrender dances at all of the frequencies, right to the densest frequency. There's an opportunity to jump in to the flow. And we flow then out of the denser frequency into the finer frequency. And the more surrender, the finer the frequency, and the greater the sense of openness and the clear knowing in the being of being the being. So this is what is in flow. And this is why it's all encompassing. And it's just about coming to recognize first with the stillness and the silence of just being, the I am presence. Because the I am presence is shared with the divine, right? It's shared with the glory. So when we come to the I am presence, when we come to the sense of being, we're in the oneness with all that is. And in the oneness, we first usually open to the depthful peace and calm and sanctuary. But as the being recognizes its own beingness, it comes alive with a flow of its knowing. And then this flow of the knowing of the innermost being, which is the flow of consciousness, consciously awake and aware of itself, flows within itself to carry itself deeper within the realms of the landscape of consciousness, deeper into itself. And then it courageously opens to the shadowlands and the discordance to bring it all home, right? But as we come to recognize the aliveness of the flow, then the aliveness is a very potent part of this unfolding. So the aliveness and its potency is to align with the flow of attraction, to align with the flow of the divine, carrying itself in surrender into itself. And in a way, that surrender just starts to feel more and more holy, more and more blissful, more and more all-consuming and compelling. And it becomes more curious to our human experience because we're really opening to the divine, and the nervous system is being refined, and we can open to rapturous, ecstatic, blissful flows that are unusual in the human experience. But we don't want to resist anything, because resisting anything blocks that flow of nourishment and devotion and surrender that's natural in consciousness, refining within itself, that we are speaking of. So, you know, the other way that we come to this potent aliveness is through the felt sense of the longing. And when we open to the felt sense of the longing can be like a portal, let's say a gateway, that can open us to the longing of the heart, this longing of the divine for itself that is planted within us, within the heart. And when we open to the longing too can be a way for some beings that's very potent to bring us to presence and to the rawness of the longing. When we don't get captured that the longing is for something external, the rawness and the wildness of the longing can bring us to a rapturous current that carries us into presence, and through the presence and the willingness to really open to the fullness and the aliveness of the longing, it brings us to the being and the knowing of the being that's flowing within itself as life, right? So it's all the same. And yet within our laws of nature, there can be slightly different subtleties to what floats our boat, right? What gets us going? What brings us alive? What carries us? What floats us into the flow of life, right? But we don't want to get mentally distracted by, am I a jnani? Am I a bhakti? And then it's got to be this way and it can't be that way, because that's just part of that collective mythic misunderstanding, right? That you're not either, you're all of it and you're none of it. You are living surrender, and living surrender is the being that knows itself like a jnani and yet flows within itself in absolute surrender, right? So the jnani is the most incredible bhakta, let's say, right? You can't have one without the other for wholeness to be whole. And so we don't want to get bogged down with mental ideas that I'm this and not that, because there's the division right there. Give it all to the glory, surrender it all back to the source, and don't be someone that thinks they are something. It's to just notice within the aliveness of the silence, of the stillness, of the heart, of the presence. You start to notice what brings you to your knowing, what brings you to the recognition where mind consciousness subsides and you're just alive in the knowing. And really, this is where this autonomy comes in, because the more that you can recognize your channel that brings the sense of the me and any division to the wide open expansiveness, it's to recognize the resonance, recognize the frequency, the vibration, recognize the hum, the pulsation, the depthful texture, recognize the pure tone, recognize what it is that is your autonomous knowing of this wide open, expansive, infinite, boundless being that you are. And then don't be distracted by anything mental. just fall in to the wide heart that is infinite and unbounded. It is the one heart, the one self, the one being. So the potency of the aliveness, the potency of the resonance is the recognition of the field, the alive field. Sometimes this is called spanda, but it doesn't matter about the words. It's the alive flow of the divine attraction, pulling itself into itself and flowing within itself in the unified knowing of its all-encompassing oneness. So it could also be called like a unity consciousness, a unified field. It's the Atman dancing within itself to really saturate the knowing of any sense of divided personal soul, individual soul, into the remembering of the universal soul that we could say, where then the universal soul discovers that its universality is beyond what it could ever reference itself in as, and it opens to the remembering of its oneness as God, right? So there's an intelligence that's flowing within itself as the aliveness. And that's why there's such a potency when we come to the flow, when we come to recognize the flow. And the flow is in the knowing of the being itself. So usually we open to being the silence and the stillness and the unmoving, unchanging. And of course, the depthful silence is always unmoving and unchanging. But there comes this flow within the knowing, like the dynamic flow of the being. And it's all one being, but it's flowing within itself as life to refine and know itself, to remember its all-encompassing glory, right? And of course, as we flow and surrender and we realize that what we are is this living surrender, we let go of language. We let go of language, right? As I think it was Rumi that said, we close the language door and open love's window, right? we just let go. We let go of language and we flow. We let go of language and any need to understand and measure, and we just flow as life. We flow as the holy. We flow as devotion. We flow as surrender. And there's nothing to understand because you are the living of this. And the living of it is the knowing of it, right? So this is what we are opening to. And this is the incredible beauty of being the flow of life. And when we speak of nourishing, what nourishes? Nourishing the knowing, nourishing the being, nourishing through allowing the blissful resonance, the sweet soma that's flowing, the nectarine bliss that flows when we're resting in the being, to flow within itself, because this is what carries us deeper into the glorious truth of who we are. And this is what refines and nourishes. So we don't want to be hanging out, nourishing, complaining, and limitation and lack, right? We want to be nourishing this nectarine flow of bliss, right? And this this soma that we speak of, like the soma is the nectar. It's the nectar. And how we release the flow of soma, we can release it on every level of life. Again, it's like the frequency of the divine surrender flow is alive on every dimension, at every level of our possible multidimensional living, that it's all one, but we can access the different frequencies the more refined the nervous system becomes, and we can release the flow of soma on the surface of life by aligning with nature and extracting the soma from all experience, right? And by releasing the tensions and the holding patterns in consciousness that can be on the mental level as conditionings and protections, on the physical level as tensions and holding patterns within the sense of the physiology and physical body as upset, imbalance, disease, allergy, all of this kind of thing. We can release the nectar by refining on every level, by aligning with nature and allowing the flow of soma, right? So it's becoming very fashionable to speak more about the somatic field, right? And releasing the somatic field and the trauma. And of course, this is that the collective consciousness is starting to really open to the holding patterns of protection that stop abidance as the awake being. And it's all starting to really open within the consciousness to be one more comprehensive recognizing of what this is really all about. But how we really open to release the field, the somatic field of its holding patterns that dance as trauma and protection and conditionings, is by coming to the being the presence, being the openness that welcomes it all through meeting the nervous system as sensation and tension and aliveness, essentially, and allowing there to be a releasing and freeing through the somatic field for the nectarine bliss to flow as the soma that nourishes itself and carries itself deeper. So there's this incredible wisdom, which is the flow of intelligence. And wherever we are in the unfolding, we're just being pulled to align wherever we are and multidimensionally, because the finest frequency that we open to, we can then open as the finest frequency to all of the dimensions and frequencies that have come before as the fine frequency that is then the embodied emanation of the finest frequency that we are living, right? So this is then the natural embodiment, is that we're just living as depthfully in the finest possible frequency that we've opened to as a living surrender. And we're nourishing the whole by creating reverberations in the collective field, by drinking in the nectar and gathering in the holiness, which enlivens the field and sends out reverberations of the finer frequencies. So in this way, we could say the reverberations of where each being is living, but then when we gather in satsang, the reverberations of the collective aliveness and flow of surrender, then send those vibrations out to be nourishment for the whole, right? In whichever way that is happening, whether it's in this way, whether it's in gathering for the chanting of bhajans and singing the holy name, whether it's gathering in companionship and staying really present and depthful in conscious connection, being the emanation of love at the checkout counter with the being that is, you know, beeping your groceries through and putting them in the bag for you. It's in every moment we can keep the reverberations serving the whole, right? Reverberating. It's that even science knows that the frequency of misery is very different to the frequency of joyous love, right? It's scientifically proven. So, not that we really care what's scientifically proven, but if it acts as a bridge, why not? So, the reverberation of living this joy, living this delight, living in awe and wonder, right? As we speak of lost in wonder, love and praise, right? Being the wide open, trembling heart that the glorious salvation of divine wholeness will enter, right? That we are this wide open heart that's trembling in vulnerability and willingness to be filled and taken deeper into the glory, right? That the living salvation can enter, and that as the living salvation enters, it belongs to no one, that we are the living salvation in the oneness, that the salvation is one, right? The glory is one. And so the living salvation is really the living surrender, right? And that serves the whole. We can't save anyone, but in the saving of yourself, let's say, by being the living surrender and nourishing this truth, we're actually impacting the whole in glorious service, but never as someone that feels like they are giving something to someone else, but by this humble surrender of being life, surrendering into itself. This is the nourishment that we're speaking of. We're speaking of this nourishment where the nectarine bliss of being nourishes itself by whatever means feels true, by whatever means feels true, being in nature, rolling in the meadows, swimming in the ocean, the lake, the river, singing and dancing, just saying yes, 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 sitting deeply in the being, gathering in love, shining as love, right? Nourishing the digestive system of the physiology with good, wholesome, simple, natural, local nourishment, right? All of these ways we're saying yes to the holiness, right? Nourishing the yes, nourishing the almighty yes in every moment, and being this almighty yes that is just in perpetual, radiant embodiment, shining, never taking a stance, never holding a position, but that the natural embodiment is actually being unattached to mind, body, and being a living, radiant, transparent, alive, vibrating physiology that looks like a human body, but as Ramakrishna so beautifully said, just a pillowcase, right? Just a pillowcase, right? This is what we are being cultured into, is looking like, but living as, but that there's this congruence that comes in where really the whole physiology is also being refined. The nervous system is being refined. And so there's this living, multi-dimensional multi-frequency, let's say, that seemingly is happening, but really all that isn't ever known is the aliveness of awareness knowing itself. The knowing is the potency that carries us to where the where the divine power and glory is pure resonance, pure frequency. And that we are being honed and refined to resonate at the finest possible frequency and bring the glory, bring the light, bring the love to the surface of life. And this is how consciousness is never really becoming humanness or humanity, that consciousness never becomes, it's only ever consciousness. And we could then say even deeper, God never becomes humanity. God stays as God, right? God never leaves God and becomes humanity. And that's why all of these ideas that humans have about creating a new humanity are mythic, because it's about humanity remembering God and then just God being God, just as God has always been God. And that the evolution of consciousness that has danced as humanity evolves out of humanity and humanness into something that we don't even know what that is, because it's just God, right? We don't need to understand or imagine with a human mind what that is, because the knowing of God is that, right? So let us sing the glory. Let us be lost in wonder, love, and praise. Let us be lost in divine surrender, not needing to know, not needing to understand, and with a knowing of what is true that can carry itself with this incredible faith. Like, true faith is really this devotion. It's this surrender. This is what true Shraddha is, right? It's this utter devoted surrender where there's already a spark of knowing. Surrender into the spark, into the fire. Let it all burn, let it all burn, let it all burn. Because the only thing that doesn't burn is that which is eternal. And if that's what we are longing for, if that's the freedom we are longing for, then let it burn. Let it all burn and leave only the light of pure knowing, right? Take away the darkness, Kali. Fill us with your light, right? Let it be so. Let it be so. And so it is. Mm. 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 So to feel the resonance, to feel the aliveness of the knowing, and that the aliveness of the knowing is one with divine wholeness. There's no measure. To feel the resonance of wholeness, the wholeness of the being that knows itself, the fullness of this moment, now just as it is, the resonance, the aliveness of life, just all inclusively dancing with itself. The resonance is everything. Being the being that knows itself, and the resonance carries itself deeper and deeper, clearer and clearer, finer and finer. Mm. Gone, gone, right? Gone beyond the Bodhisvaha, this divine celebration of utter disappearance. Bodhisvaha. Mm.